let's talk about the tools a little bit. From what I read, you guys shot this on the Alexa 65s
Yep.
with the Hasselblad DNA primes. What was the reason? I guess, what is your creative process when picking out and selecting the camera? Obviously,
Sure.
it's a larger canvas than most.
Yeah.
And what was the intention? Was there specific references? And how did you guys collaborate to make sure that was the right tool for the job and eventually leading that whole pipeline into post?
Yeah, sure. I mean, knowing that it was most likely going to go to streaming, the Alexa 65 doesn't necessarily seem like the most logical choice, but we both love the camera for, a lot of the references that we'd looked at, particularly, actually, even in television, like Lisi's Story, and I don't believe The Servant was shot on. I think that was more the LF, but there were quite a few references coming through that had been shot on it, which made us sort of want to explore it a little bit more. The main reason, though, is essentially the lack of distortion that you get on wide lenses when you come in close to the talent or a subject or an object. That was something that was really important to us. We wanted to be really up close and personal with Rose and see her vulnerability and see the trauma, but also feel the environment around her. Rather than going telephoto or being on a smaller rather than going telephoto and compressing everything, we actually wanted the audience to see and feel the environment. If we tested smaller formats like the Mini and the LF, and I believe we ended up with ARRI, so they were really the cameras we stuck with testing, and that we were both comfortable with. Usually, anyway, we don't. I can talk about different manufacturers or whatever. We don't need to go there. They're all great for different reasons, but in this case, we were with ARRI Rental. They really looked after us, and we were able to test everything. And that was the main reason, really. Like you get so much more distortion when you're on a smaller format on a wide lens. Like people's faces get warped and things like that. And we didn't want to do that to Soci. We wanted to keep the perspective more or less, within a normal kind of realm. And that was really it. Like it's amazing in low lights. It's essentially 3 Alexa sensors stacked together. So that's relative to grain size, and screen size. But yeah, if you're on a smaller screen, I found that you could. There's a little bit more room to play with the ISO without things getting really noisy and stuff like that. But essentially, that was the main reason. It was the perspective that you get. Like you can be on a 28mm lens, which was the widest lens we had with the DNAs. I think that's equivalent to around a 14mm, something like that. I should know my math a bit better. 14, 15, 16mm, something. Which is a very wide lens if you're on on an LF or a Mini or the Super 35 sensor. But you get that same field of view, but not the warping, which can be great for certain projects. Like, Fear and Loathing Las Vegas, it works having people's faces like really big and crazy in frame. I love that too. Yeah. I mean, everything has a place. Like I'd be totally open to doing a film like that. But in this case, it was the right format. And Parker really loved what he saw. And he's a very visual director as well. Like he's got really strong sort of a take on how he wants things to look. And that's great. Like, and we kind of worked, he'd tell me sort of things and I'd be like, okay, like, can we try this? Maybe try that? And he'd always have an opinion. And that's, I think we just landed on it and we were like, this is cool. And then being able to shoot on the Alexa 65, there were some concerns about the amount of data and disk space and the cost and all that sort of stuff. But ARRI were really helpful in allowing us to use it. It's becoming an older camera now, so it's not necessarily reserved for these big $100 million epics anymore. Like people out there that want to use it, talk to ARRI because they might be able to work something out. It's a really cool format, and we're pushing to have them update it as well if they're listening. Like we're kind of hoping that they go forward and create a next generation Alexa 65. They've also got, and Dave, you probably better speak more to this, high density encoding recording where you can you're still shooting ARRI RAW and it's I believe lossless it's
a lossless compression, so you can actually reduce your file size while maintaining the RAW without any loss of quality.
And that was a huge selling point, like to be able to tell Paramount that they can save 40% on disk space and transfers and all that sort of stuff. That was huge, and
especially being able to send it back to where it was being cut and things like that. Is like you don't have every single take for the entire shoot sitting on a drive there. I mean, you have a week or 2 weeks maybe, and you've got to get stuff off. So, it's trying to maximize that space, to speed ratio, and that was one of the benefits that didn't exist originally. I think when we did, I did The Great Wall. That did not exist. That was just massive files.
Meaty files, yeah.
And you have to put it through the plexer to put the 3 chips together to make the raw. It was a process, but the
definitely helped.
The encoding really did it would allow a show that mightn't necessarily have the budget in terms of that dailies post to be able to utilize it.
Yeah, 100%. And then you can use it across all of their cameras too.
Yep.
You know, you could use it on the Mini or the Mirror, and like it actually can scale right back to. So you know, for people that haven't looked into that, I recommend it because it was news to me at the time. I was like, what? How can you, you know, the old what is it? Full Metal Jacket reference: a golf ball through a garden hose. Like, how do you do that? Like, but they have figured it out, and it saves time and money. So yeah.
No, that's really amazing insight. And as you started to craft the image, this is a horror film, right? So it is a genre. You have to figure out to work within what not necessarily audience's expectations are, but what did you start to consider when you both were going into this project, from just the image, capturing it on set, to delivering it in post? Was there any insight that you gave Charlie leading about just like exposure generally, or were there any considerations for lighting that you were trying to hit, especially with Parker? Like, what was the process collaboratively between the three of you to execute this film?
Well, I think this is mainly going to be him talking, but there was definitely that bit where we spoke about being able to see into the shadows, even if not clearly. We needed to be able to sense that something is potentially there.
Yeah.
And so we did have that conversation, and that's why we built the LUT with a little bit of range in there, so that Charlie could shoot over, LUT would bring it down, so they get the look that they want, but there was that safety net, because if you're playing that hard into shadows and you're shooting it right, like exactly how you wanted it, with no safety net, things can unfortunately, like, you just get into a black hole, and then you can't dig things out. So we definitely had that discussion and built that. But I mean, that was our main conversation regarding that side of things.
We definitely shared references like going in that Parker and I had spoke about, and we all got on the same page with that, like to build that LUT as you spoke to earlier. And but yeah, as far as like the process of developing it with Parker, like he's a film buff. Like, you know, he'd tell me stories about his family and his father. They would just watch so many films, you know, growing up. His dad had an AV company, and that was a big part of their family life. So he was such a, you know, I learned a lot from him coming in, and he shared some references that I hadn't seen, and we had a lot in common as far as the sort of the look and feel. I think that sort of like he was happy when I sort of presented a couple of references that he'd already had in mind. He's like, cool. Like, so we just got off to a good start, and he'd been thinking about this film obviously a lot longer than I had. So there were certain sequences in there that he had really great ideas for, and he would come over to my place, and sometimes I go to his, and we would shot list before official pre started, and we would just talk through the film and the script and shot list. And he was as I mentioned, he's like a very visual guy that like, you know, can see these things sort of playing out, and we would sort of would sit there and sort of shoot the shit and improvise, a bit like playing jazz, and come up with things, and a lot of my job, I feel like, is to really help, you know, some of these ideas come to life about what sort of tools we'd use and what sort of lighting could help enhance it, and that was great. Yeah, he's really, you know, awesome. I'm excited for the guy. I think he's going to be a force. But that's sort of, I guess, you know, before official pre started, you know, we shared a lot of references, and I think I've told this story before, but there was this film Possession out of Europe that I had to buy 2 Blu-ray players for. You know, he had this obscure thing I hadn't seen. It actually stars Sam Neill and stuff.
Isabella Adjani.
Yeah, really cool film. And that's where a lot of the whole filmic kind of thing came in. Like a lot of these references, he's very influenced by 80s and 70s horror and stuff like that. And we didn't really want a clean image. Like shooting on film wasn't really going to be a thing. And just with time and budget, and you know, Parker's first film, so I think he was wanting to, you know, really get a sense of seeing the image on set and things like that, which is, you know, totally understandable. So shooting on film wasn't necessarily going to be an object. I wanted to test some things on it, but it sort of got shut down, I think, on a studio level, unfortunately. Like, not to say that they wouldn't for other things, but it didn't really happen that way. Did you craft any forms of like rules of engagement, considering composition, the way that the characters worked within the frame? Is there anything that you were trying to do, like keep these characters in singles always? Was there anything that you and Parker talked about early on? Yeah, good question. One of the rules that we had was we didn't really want to have no over the shoulders, because we didn't want to bring Rose, we didn't want to attach her to anybody. We wanted her to keep her isolated. So whenever Rose is in the scene, which is basically every scene, you'll notice the camera's always between people. Like there'll be a wide shot where they're obviously together, and you set that up. So, there might be some movement and passing of one another, but essentially there's no over-the-shoulder coverage, which is very different to how I've shot most of my other projects and films and stuff like that. But I think it worked. I think it was a cool way to approach it. The other rules, we always wanted the camera to be like a lurking presence, a lot of movement, but then not being afraid just to lock things down too, not movement for the sake of it. That's something I really love about working with Parker, things should move for a reason. And I think we spoke earlier about with horror, it's with any genre really, but it's what do you want the audience to see? What do you not want them to see? And color and lighting and composition all plays a part of that. So it's just going in quite prepared. Sometimes you don't always get it right. You run out of time. A scene that we might have 5 shots for, we had to do in 3, and that would be frustrating sometimes. But I think having that foundation and going in with those rules is really important, because you can kind of fall back on it, and then it's a template. It's just something to come back to and help you in the moment, especially when you're running out of time and stuff like that. But yeah, there was some rules, and there's definitely some rules with color and stuff like that with the set design as well. But yeah, that was one of the main ones that come to mind. Is there was a couple of scenes, I know Joel and Rose in Joel's apartment, they're kind of stacked up, but the depth of field's really tiny in that we still wanted to have that separation. I think we, on the Alexa 65 shooting at 2s or something crazy like that, where, one eye's in, but so when there's 2 people in frame, we still really wanted to separate them. That was a way to kind of, get around that when people are sitting next to each other, and it was really hard to get singles rather than shooting straight against a wall, yeah.
Yeah, color-wise, there was the concept of yellow.
Yep.
So if you watch the film, you'll notice when you notice yellow, something is probably happening or around. So it was, again, it's leaning on these traditional concepts that are not overt, but hopefully people who really enjoy the genre will embrace and enjoy the fun of.
Yeah, even on a subconscious level, right? An example is in the interview room with it. It's quite heavily featured in the trailer. Yellow flowers, there might be yellow tie, there might be yellow gift wrapping paper and things like that. And it was really fun working with Parker and Alexis, our costume designer, and Lester Cohen, the production designer, and all these different departments. And it was cool that Parker was adamant that certain things should be there for a reason. It's just a fun, I don't know, it just adds a little bit more excitement to certain things as well. I
love what you did with the interior of the hospital with the pastel pink colors. And I know we were talking about this before, how and they might still do this in psychiatric facilities, but a lot of times they use these colors to help soothe the patients on a psychological level. Is that something that Parker and yourself talked with the set decorator and the art department to help execute?
Definitely. I would say I was certainly involved in all these discussions, but a lot of that I'd give credit to Parker and Lester for. And then, we would come back all as a group and would figure out, something I did help Lester with is the tone of pink and how that reads on camera in the testing days and stuff like that. So, but a lot of those ideas were conceived by Parker and Lester. And then, I'd sort of come to the table with if we're building a set, where the windows could go and where the what space is needed for camera and the different, how with the light that we designed, how does that react to the shade of pink and things like that.
And what's interesting there is even when they're in the interview room, as in the patient interview room, the shades on the window are pink as well. So they're lit through the window, this pink. So you get the obvious pink at the window, but you also get this kind of uncomfortable, blue cyane from the walls, but then there's pink. And normally a lot of cinematographers that I've worked with is I can't stand this pink, I can't stand magenta. It's that awkward color.
Yeah.
Because the opposite color is green, and neither one of them are necessarily something that you want on skin tones.
It's quite often it's not the most flattering.
You have to find that thing. So when there's definitely a statement is being made, is we're pumping light through a pink shade that's going to hit people with an almost opposite color. Again, it was this uncomfortable,
and that's really one of the main themes for it. We just wanted people to be uncomfortable basically the whole time.
We did a really good job at that, both of you. And something we were both mentioning that I would love to talk about, you said it already, originally this was intended for streaming, and then it eventually changed to a theatrical release. You guys did Dolby Cinema. At what point in the process, was it during principal or in post, that got changed, and did that affect anything?
I'll just say quickly, it tested really well. So when it did so, I remember even having conversations with Parker, being really excited and be like, do you think that could mean that they might want to take it theatrical? And he's like, oh, maybe. Like, there was whispers early on about, like, mainly amongst ourselves, are like, wouldn't that make sense if it's tested really well and the audience liked it? So, but it wasn't until we were in a colour session where Parker got the call and he stepped out and he came back in. He was like, I just had a great call with Paramount.
Yeah, we're a week in.
Yeah.
So it was, you know, we were near the middle of doing it when we found out, you know.
Yeah. So yeah, that's sort of, we didn't know when we were shooting. Like, we were kind of, even though we were colouring in the theatre and stuff like that, and maybe we could speak a bit about that. And if you've got, you know, there's different processes for different deliveries and stuff like that. But at that point, I think we were just, they still wanted it to be, you know, coloured in a way that I guess it was going to be at a cinema somewhere. There was talk of it going to festivals or like...
Yeah, and we wanted a theatrical look, so, you know, traditional, you know, SDR kind of look. So we wanted to do that hero grade in that environment, because especially with streaming, you can just say, oh, we're going to do the hero in HDR and everything can be derived from that. At the moment, the downside creatively to that is filmmakers, you know, living and breathing the show months, years before it comes into the DI room. And so if you suddenly go into HDR, if you have not monitored, if you have not cut in HDR, it can be quite affronting. Like you go, oh, this is not the movie we've been looking at, and you have to learn to see the image again. Whereas if you start in SDR in this case, it's an easier transition. So, all right, in this scene, I want to do that. It's like it's less of a jumping off place. You can just start doing the creative work, and then as you move to HDR after it, you can say, oh, let's embrace this or whatever. But it can be a little bit tricky. But with this one, it was always wanted to be. I mean, the film has so many references and homages and everything to great horror cinema, you know, because Parker loves it, you know, and that was part of the film, the texture and everything discussion is like, we want to like that. So we all kind of agreed, like, let's do it on the big screen, let's do it like that, and we're just going to embrace that this is theatrical, even though it's not. Yeah. And then we'll handle the other things. And we, you know, I've done quite a few films like that. Yeah. But it could be we're just grading on a monitor and that's how we go. But we did decide to just embrace it. So we were sitting in the theatre kind of when we found out. And then after that sank in after a few days, you know, one of the initial reasons that we were all put in contact with each other was, what ways can we embrace the film look without using film? Because there's no budget for it and everything. So we were going to emulate, throw grain and flicker and weave and all of the stuff that we can try to make it look like it's gone through an optical process. But once we found out that there was a theatrical possibility, we said, well, maybe we can do it for real. Maybe we can go to film and bring it back like we had with mega budget Dune and Batman. Yeah. But he was a very modest budget film, so this is why it was never a thought process. Yeah, it's funny, like when we found out, like these little ideas start to be like, oh, they're going to give us that. Then maybe like what can we, you know, what are they willing to do? So we chose about 5 minutes of just key shots, represented everything in the movie, shot it out to film, we duped it onto IP just to see if we wanted that, you know, because there was always the reference to these traditional, I would say 80s, 90s kind of style. But one thing I'll say to that is, like, we did also choose a format that's quite clean, like in the camera. So it wasn't, we wanted to find that balance of not feeling a little bit contrived, like, oh, like... We didn't want it grainy. Yeah, and it was the other things, really. Just a little bit of texture. So after we did this little test, we kind of, obviously led by these guys, but we all kind of agreed for this film. Well, a better salesman. And I didn't, you know, like the guy that, like Photocam, which was so kind in helping with all of this, like an amazing place, but like, you know, the gentleman that's just come off all these films with all that experience doing it, it was just like really fortunate in a way that like it was able to become an idea that turned into a possibility, but then not only that, it was like led by people that are like the most experienced at doing it. So we're very fortunate to be under that roof at that moment where they're like, the lab's out the back,
I've done this
Let's
before.
do the test. Let's
do the test. I mean, yeah.
What's the worst they're going to say?
That's right.
No.
It's there. Like, they can do it. You know, they don't have to take it somewhere else. So we were, very fortunate.
Yeah, so we
with that.
chose just to do it off neg because, again, it wasn't about grain and artifice. It was more just drawing the audience in, letting them to believe. Because with any movie, whether it's like real life or whatever, it's still artifice. We are watching a projected image and we're meant to believe. Hopefully with great storytelling and acting, performance, like cinematography, everything, you're drawn into the story. But with these cameras, especially when you're shooting on the Alexa 65 with these clean lenses, like it is pristine. Like it is a pristine image. So while beautiful and perfect, there's something that might just hold the audience at arm's length. And so this is why the discussion when they couldn't shoot on film originally, it was like, well, what can we do with grain or some form of emulation? So when we were grading under an emulation layer because we always wanted to have something. But then we had this opportunity and we went, well, let's do the test. And then these guys go, well, like, like we like this. Yeah. And so we presented to the studio who I think we were all feeling like, well, let's see. And they came in and said, absolutely. Like, I don't know what the discussion was behind closed doors. Yeah. But as far as we were concerned, it was like, yes, that allows you to believe it. It was just,
you were getting ready to have to say a lot more than what you did.
Yeah,
right?
and then they pretty much sold it to me. You know,
again, credit to Paramount for that. Like, there's a lot. I think they've done a lot of really cool things with this one and given us opportunities and stuff. So,
filmmaker centric. You know, like what's going to tell the best story. You know, and so we were very lucky. So again, on a more modest budget where you wouldn't expect to do it, is like you could still do it. And thankfully, when they did say we're going theatrical, there was still time to do it because usually you have to plan this stuff and like delivery windows to everything are very compressed. But there was always, we were doing it and they hadn't worked out when they were going to release it yet. And then we found out and they said it's going to be this date. So we still had the time. So we were lucky. And then we finished the movie, we did the home video, we did the HDR. Then, maybe 6 weeks after that, they said, maybe we should do a Dolby theatrical version as well. So we'd kind of put the movie to bed.
Kept on giving.
Why not?
You know? Yeah.
And we all said, absolutely.
It's like, is this what it's like? Is this what, moving forward, you know? Like, no.
So, we said absolutely. So we went in there and spent a few days. Well, I spent a few days and then presented to these guys. And
that was a learning curve for me too, seeing the difference between regular sort of theatrical projection versus Dolby and that sort of HDR realm of like what it offers. That was a treat. And
what do you both find really special about Dolby Cinema in delivering in that format?
Well, for me, it's really allowing the audience to experience exactly how we create it. Quite often with traditional theatrical experiences, you're at the mercy of the theaters projecting things correctly. You know, be it light level, focus, color spill, you know, exit signs next to the screen. Like you're at the mercy of every single cinema is going to be different. But the good thing about the Dolby experience is they do have a spec. They do set the rules, and the light levels are going to be right. Plus, it has that extended dynamic range, so it has in like a 32-foot Lambert rather than a 14-foot Lambert. So there's more latitude to play with. It goes into a deeper black. But I always say it's not necessarily about how bright we can make it, how dark we can make it. It's how good does it represent what we creatively want to do? If you pull the constraints back, we can sit where we want to do it. Whereas quite often, you know, even like in the SDR world, is the constraints are dictating things to us. So we make decisions based on that. You know, with Dolby, it really opens that up. So then we can choose where we want to put things down. So it really is probably the most accurate representation of what we're trying to achieve. And you know, if you go to any theatre, it will be representative of that.
And also the audio side of things too, right? Like
I'm just talking purely
no,
vision.
But that is also another added benefit to it. You get to see it like
Dolby Atmos,
in all its light with this amazing, audio escape. So I think it's awesome.
Would you say, and this is even for the both of you collectively, is there a scene or a frame, this is finding the frame here,